Hello, this will be part 5 in the series History of the Hermetic, and in this episode I'm going to have a focus on some of the works by Stephan Michelspacher. But before we begin, let's go back to approximately 14th century BCE, BC, however you want to call it, and the Uluburun shipwreck. Now it's interesting for a number of reasons. Firstly is that the metal ingots, but also the glass that was found on there, and both the metal and the glass would have connections to what was called alchemy, what we think of as astronomy now. So, for instance, the ingots were found on there. There were ingots of copper and of tin at a ratio of 10:1, which is the perfect ratio for creating bronze. And so, not only was the coloured glass, but also the ingots are indicating this older stream of knowledge and how important it is. But first, let's now go have a look at some of the works by Stephan Michelspacher, and I hope I've got that pronunciation right, from the early 1600s. Now, this is one of his from his works, one of his drawings there, and we'll go through these in the video, but just have to begin with. And so here's another interesting one, and these will be the ones that I'll be focusing on here. If you type in his name, you can find some PDFs, lots of imagery, lots of stuff available on there if you want to go into more detail. And once more, so each of these illustrations is loaded with a whole set of information, and especially it's done in a symbolic way. And we now we have a certain way where we need to read things and have it like with officially formatted ISBN numbers and all this sort of stuff. Anything which doesn't fit that particular mold or has any relic of spirituality, religion, that type of thing, well, it tends to be immediately poo-pooed on, and it's all nonsense. Let's forget about it. Let's ignore it. Let's erase imperial measures because metric is all great and so forth. But again, it's the new religion is almost anti-religion, and I'm not a religious person, so I'm not sticking up for that. But I also am opposed to fundamentalist atheists, who basically tell, who are guilty of the same things of what the fundamental religionists are. But okay, we begin with this image. We have the 4 elements: fire, air, water, and earth. Now this will also connect to the Platonic solids. So for instance, the tetrahedron, octahedron, icosahedron, and the cube have been for quite some time connected to the 4 elements. Now the 5th one, the dodecahedron, is connected to the heaven or the spirit or divine. There's different ways of discussing. People interpret that, but basically, yeah. But what's interesting is that if you, especially the octahedron, 1440 degrees. Well, if you add up the degrees of all which create the Platonic solids, you add all of them up together, you get 14,400. 144 appears again. Now, if you're familiar with all the previous videos or other people who are into this field, the importance of this number is huge. It's in across cultures, all these ancient texts, but especially in regards to Rosicrucians. Well, for instance, they hold that there are 144 elements, connection obvious to chemistry / alchemy, and 144 octaves. And so one of the and I'll try to remember to put the link in the description. I've got a playlist where you can, with a compass and straight edge, just to show you can make your own Platonic solids. It's quite easy if you're interested in learning in geometry, because it all emerges from the Vesica and these same themes and these geometric fundamentals, which again go back to Pythagorean and Platonic schools, because all of this knowledge bleeds in. So music, astronomy, geometry, arithmetic, alchemy, are all, the Hermetic school is basically one of the points of this, is that multiple sets of knowledge merge together, and that's one of the beauties of it. Now, so on the left-hand side, we have one of Stephan Michelspacher's drawings, and now, geez, I forget the name of the other one, but just as an indication of a connection. So now I've focused in on the mountain there, which has these steps going up, and what we have is these 7 figures. Well, they're actually also the 7 heavenly bodies. So before telescopes, sun, Earth, Moon, Mars, Venus, Jupiter and Saturn were visible to the naked eye. But the interesting point is we have a double reference to the Sun and Moon here. So if we compare that to the illustration on the right, we have again the 7 heavenly bodies and a double reference to the Sun and the Moon, Anima and Spiritus. Also corpus, you might notice on the bottom between the legs, a cube, again. But also on either side of the one on the right, we have the Sun King and the Moon Queen, Diana or Apollo is one way to look at that. So again, double references and then a triple reference to the Sun and the Moon. But now with a focus on that, so you see the astronomical symbols of those planets, Venus, Mars, the Sun, which is not technically a planet, Mercury, the Moon, which is a satellite, not technically a planet, Jupiter, and Saturn. Well, they also correspond to the elements of copper, iron, gold, mercury, silver, tin and lead. Now copper, 10 parts copper, 1 part tin, that's bronze. And you'll find that in a previous episode I discussed the net, how copper and iron form the net, which was something that Isaac Newton was interested in and which was one piece of a philosopher's stone. So there we see the connections. Now this is another one of his illustrations. Now the fountain there, we have again the 7 heavenly bodies, including the Sun and the Moon, and they're very similar. The figures, the way that they are drawn, they're just described in a similar fashion. But the interesting one with the one on the left now is that we also have essentially an as above, so below reference. So we see the ones on the fountain, but underneath we see them buried beneath the earth, and I think at least this is a reference to the origins and then to the refined, the ones that have been mined and refined. But an interesting, again, in regards to the whole Hermetic school of as above, so below. And now with a focus on this illustration, and I will have a look at the zodiac, which connects to the precession of the equinoxes. Typically it's, you'll see like in your newspaper or whatever, or not newspapers these days, but the 12 signs of the zodiac connected with astrology, but they are also astronomical depictions. It's and the precession of the equinoxes, which is a fundamental theme in regards to the sacred architecture, not only just of like modern national capitals such as Washington, Canberra, Brasilia and Astana, but going back through the great cathedrals, back to ancient temples, but again recurring theme, modern and old, all connected within this general school, architecture, legends, all those things, everything bleeds together. So now we see again return to that illustration, and so around the outside of the mountain we have the 12 signs of the zodiac. Now they're arranged in an unusual fashion, and it might be worth noting the symbols which are connected to them. You'll see them a little bit later, but again the importance of the zodiac. For instance, there we see Taurus. Now of the 4 cardinal points, and you'll see the difference in, for instance, Aquarius. These are standards on for instance, churches, and so the 4 evangelists or the 4 gospels. Again, so modern, in inverted commas, Christianity has so much derived from what might be considered pagan or much older schools, older streams of knowledge. And so as a comparison, so again we can compare 2 of those pictures, and you see the 12 signs of the zodiac, which are arranged not in the proper order, but that in itself is giving you a little bit of information. But if we compare it to the other one, Kabbalah, on the right hand side, and again, and now just to zoom in to give an idea, so we have Leo the lion with the sphere and 3 of the constellations of the zodiac, Aries and Taurus once more. So 3 spheres, 9 inside, but also the 3 on the outside. So again, we have the 12 signs of the zodiac. And where are we now? Okay, and now notice that the picture on the right from the six-pointed star at the top there. These are lines emerging, pointing to stars. Now, if you Alan Green or the Barcode channel, excellent work he's done on that, and there's some really I'll have to do a video on that. The math connections to there again are connecting to well, some really important stuff, and he's done some work on. You can find his channel link on my page on my YouTube page in related videos. The Barcode or the Shakespeare equation is his other channel. But again, now I've focused in on, and within the circle you can see the Phoenix and the Sun and the Moon. Well, that actually compares to calcination, which is well, now we'll compare it to, again, back to this same picture. And you'll find the very same theme emerging there, and I'll have in any second now we'll see I'm going to blow that up a little bit so you can see it clearer. Now you might notice also the well, the bird, and now geez, what I've forgotten, the peacock in the center, the phoenix, but the sun on there as well. Well, this will connect to one of the stages of alchemy, which is also connected to the pelican and to the phoenix, and it's reducing something by basically burning something to ashes to create, which is a chemical process as well. So alchemy and chemistry are interchangeable. Just that chemistry has removed itself from connect. You know, we've separated physics, chemistry, maths into these separate schools, but they actually do blend in together, and that's the genius of this older system. Now, again, we saw this picture earlier, but just as the previous episodes in this series, the tetragrammaton or the tetractys, which connects to Pythagorean schools, or in Kabbalist tradition, it's the name of God, and written in the Old Hebrew. Now, on the fountain there, we see a Christ. Well, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's blood emerging from his chest. He was, you know, just like the legend is, Christ was stabbed by the legionnaire. But it's the alchemical wedding of sun and moon, which is something in regards to Christian Rosenkreuz, and again Rosicrucianism, and this theme of the alchemical wedding of sun and moon, and this repeated theme throughout. Or you'll notice how often the male and the female are even blended together. Now, an interesting point is that the sun, or the king there, has the triple crown, and again, if we compare it to another one of Stephan Michelspacher's illustration, how we can see this stacked crown on there and the triple crown, which is, yeah, so it's something else in it. Now with a focus on this one, so I'm zooming in, and there we can see now, again, back to in the top left-hand corner, we have the sun with the tetragrammaton, but we have a dove, Columba, flying down, and a line leading to the fountain. From the fountain, now highlighted in red, from the with that Christ figure, we see that there is a pathway leading us to, again, another figure bearing the cross, and there's an angel there, and then finally in the green line, the dove returns to the sun. Now, I'm not really sure what's going on there, just to point it out. Now, another interesting in regards to that one, we have Saturn with a peg leg, is missing a leg. Well, you'll see it again. So on the illustration on the right-hand side, again, Saturn with his peg leg, and the picture's almost deceptive. So because the figure behind it, the leg, you know, at a glance, you wouldn't probably notice it, but you'll, you know, yeah, again, so these themes that different people continue these through, and again how planetary symbols, sun and moon, and included, also connect to chemical symbols still today's. Now as we return to this picture, and now with a focus on the steps. Now there are 7 steps in alchemy. Again, there's a lot of literature has been passed on through the time. It's just, unfortunately, everything has been polluted in a sense, because it's yeah, anything in regards to this subject is immediately considered pure, you know, voodoo, mysticism, all that sort of thing, and well, that's a shame. It really is. But so, for instance, on those steps, we begin with a tincture. Now, a tincture is an extract, typically a plant or of an animal, dissolved in alcohol, and so laudanum was a medical cannabis is one of the description of it, but laudanum was a tincture, basically a mixture of opium and alcohol, and for quite some time it's been a medicine. Also can be abused. Let's not jump around that. Now, coagulation, we know that blood coagulates, but it's the same chemical process by which cheese curds are made. And this will also connect to the beehive, because Aristaeus, the Greek god, was the god of cheese making and honey making and animal husbandry, and of basically the chemical processes, the sciencey side of farming. Now, distillation, well, whether you're making moonshine or you're making petrol, you don't have to be making illegal, but whether it's scotch, okay, that's through distillation, but petrol. So what we're seeing here is that the chemical processes that we use still now, that are strictly speaking official science, modern science, actually they were doing this quite some time ago, and there's an arbitrary line in history in regards to what is alchemy, what is chemistry. Modern chemistry used to believe in phlogiston theory, so if anyone poo-poos alchemy, well, they should understand that the chemical history is a bit messed up as well. But putrefaction is essentially fermentation, and again another depiction with Saturn of the peg leg, and typically we'd think of putrefaction, putrefied or overrotten, but it's also blackening or negredo, but it's also a transition. So just like wine fermentation, it's in our chemical sense, it's also the changing from one form to another, or resurrection. So you put almost like the body does, rots, but then from the rot emerges new life. There's nutrition in there, or just like fermenting grape juice becomes wine. Solution, well, again, if you mix an energy drink where you tip Gatorade, I suppose, that's a solution because you're mixing something. Now, sublimation's a little bit interesting, difficult. Essentially, it's a transition now. In modern sense, it's a transition from a solid directly to gas, or in the opposite sense, deposition is the opposite. So from gas directly to solid. But there is a connection there to fermentation. And sublimation is a distillation, is another step in the distillation process. Calcination or purification by fire, reducing something to, again you see these old, now whether it's through a magnifying glass or heating something in a cauldron, but again, once again, so that particular step is also seems to be connected with the phoenix. Phoenix rises from the ashes, as also the pelican. So again, one of these symbols we've been talking about. We saw it, for instance, Queen Elizabeth. Others are wearing it. Now, in the series I did on New York and I talked about George Washington, the very strong connections there, and you can see his statue made for the 100th. Celebrate his 100th birthday. I was pretty sure it was his birthday. Well, that connects to the famous image of Baphomet, and you can see on his hand solve and coagula. Well, again, these are alchemical references. The caduceus, the two snakes, and also the double breast, because Hermaphroditus was the child of Hermes and Venus, and was hermaphrodite. And once again, the chemical wedding, and in so many alchemical pictures, you'll see, often like one body, but with a male and a female head, and that there are, and for instance, Isaac Newton in his diagrams, he described each element, but he also pointed out that each had a female and a male aspect, which is nice because, for instance, in Sanskrit, there were the letters also had a female and a male aspect. In Buddhism, it's a similar theme. Now, here's another picture. Now, to begin with, the interesting one is the eagle and the lion. Now, this is something you'll see again repeated throughout these. Sometimes a double-headed eagle, but you'll notice that typically there should be a line splitting them, but that's something else in the middle section of it. So two pictures on either side, which show the mining and processing of the ore. Again, we see the caduceus, so the snakes around there, and the circle on the right hand side, antimonium, vismuth, which is bismuth, vitriol, which was where sulfuric acid was extracted, but sulfur was on top. So, and the picture on the bottom, well, you clearly can see it's a lab. All apart from the dress and maybe the desks and benches, it's a chemistry lab, you know. But what I find particularly interesting in regards to this one is the middle panel and the references to the mining. So, you know, he's cutting out the ore, and then on the right hand side we see them bringing out the ore for refining. Now, from swords to also for pieces of shipping and the rigging and metallurgy / alchemy was hugely important. But so here we just see a close up of there, and you know, basically the mining process. Now, a couple of reasons I find that particularly interesting is, firstly, from published in 1556, 1 year after his death, George Agricole, the book De Re Metallica, and again on the cover sheet have Caduceus once more, and well, the connection, because mining, well, very interesting. Now, what I mean by that is, okay, so now we see two on the right hand side. We see two of the pictures from the De Re Metallica, which is a mining handbook, quite a lengthy book. You can get it as a download PDF. But on the top right, we see there's a man there with divining rods. And why I find that interesting is because in regards to ancient mines, now, if this seam began at ground level and they could follow it down to create deep mines, but there are more than a few sites around the world that I've noticed over the years that have that are shafts that are sunk down, and that somehow they were able to know that there was deposits of ore some length down. They don't. The seam does not, you know, start at ground level, and they followed it down, and they were able to find this. Now, the landscape should be, if it was just exploratory shafts, the landscape should be, you know, littered with, you know, hundreds or thousands of shafts going them for them just randomly trying to find these deposits. Yet they're not. The deep mines from older times tend to have, like, basically, yeah, they've started and they've cut down, and now how do you find those things? Well, I think the divining rods is interesting. Now, I know that, for instance, in regards to finding water, and there have been some experiments where they've tested modern diviners. Well, I think that, for instance, they would put plastic pipes underneath and turn the water on and off, and then if the diviner couldn't, and that was taken as conclusive. Well, yes, but no, but yes, but, because, you know, maybe, you know, what's happening there. Now, I'm going to finish this video with a clip from a video called Geopathic Stress, or a documentary, and there are some interesting aspects in regards to that, because even though people don't like to talk about it, certain mining companies, engineering companies do employ these people, but they do it on, you know, don't advertise it loudly. And secondly is they visit a site, now the name escapes me, it's I think it's the Scottish, well, it's one of those old estates, and the guy with the divining rods is tested against a guy with electronic equipment, and they both find similar things happening, but yet the one with the divining rods sort of does it quicker and more accurately is interesting. But also that this particular architect who did that house and did a couple of others, well, in regards to architecture and that, for instance, Chartres Cathedral is built on top of a junction of many underground water sources, and this tends to be in older temples as well. So, you know, they put it on a particular spot, and well, I think this would all connect, and it also sort of joins with this because, you know, alchemy or chemistry, they need the raw materials in the ores. Sometimes you can find it at the ground and follow the seam down, yet some places seem to have dug straight down and found this a deep deposit of ore and so forth. And well, how did they do it? Now, yeah, so anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to finish with a section of video from this Geopathic Stress. You can just put Geopathic Stress documentary into your YouTube search bar and you should be able to pull out the whole thing because it's quite an interesting one. Now I'm not anyway, so I'm not saying it's all true. I don't know, but there are interesting connections. There's a bit to it, and so anyway, I hope you enjoyed and have a good one.
The adenosine triphosphate.
ATP is essential for life. Without it, we would die. It is created inside every cell in our body and relies on a process involving electrons. However, exposure to electric fields can have a serious impact on the production of this important molecule.
If you bring a moving magnetic field near to your hands when they're under tension, you will find that the body can't make as much energy as it did before, so it can't maintain that same tension. If those hands, while they're clenched, happen to be holding a willow stick or a pair of divining rods, then influence on the muscle tone by means of ATP synthesis changes are bound to make the rods move or the stick twitch. And it's a technique which has been used effectively for generations, for centuries, if not more.
We found this footage of American soldiers during the Vietnam War who had been trained to find enemy tunnels and landmines using only dowsing rods. During our time with Brendan, he told us about an architect called Daniel Robinson, who had designed many important buildings in Ireland. By pure chance, Brendan had tested one of them and noticed a strange effect happening. Whilst geopathic stress lines were heading towards the building, they would fade in strength and stop at the outside walls, starting again on the other side. We decided to visit one of the architect's buildings, Johnstown Castle, which now houses the Department for Agriculture, right next door to the Environmental Protection Agency. With no explanation as to why this effect was happening, we thought this would be an ideal opportunity to bring together science and intuition, so we invited Roger Coghill to Ireland to see if he could verify Brendan's findings scientifically.
I've been telling people here, in particular around South East, but throughout Ireland, about geopathic stress, and without scientific proof of the existence of it in the first place, and then the effect that it has on the body. And it's going to be great now to meet somebody at last that can scientifically prove what I have been claiming for years.
These energies are invisible, and what we can't see, it's difficult to believe in. I've brought a geomagnetometer with me so we can underpin his findings with a scientific approach too. I'm sure that when Brendan and I have a chat, we'll soon find some common ground because of that scientific basis. Here we are. Look, I think I see him here. Let's see. Let's go and say hello. Hi.
Roger.
Is it Brendan? How nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
I've heard so much about you.
Likewise.
And I'm looking forward to hearing all you have to tell me, and perhaps telling you a few things too.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
It was obvious from the beginning that although Roger and Brendan were from very different backgrounds, they were both speaking the same language.
But Daniel Robertson designed this back in between 1810 and 1855, and he designed Castleborough, as I was saying also. But the same thing is here as is in Castleborough, whereas by the lines come from a distance at their normal strength.
Yes.
But as they approach the house, they decrease in strength.
Really?
And by the time they get to the boundary wall, the outside wall of the house, they actually stop completely.
Really? Yeah. So he knew something.
He knew something that we have lost.
We've lost.
I just find this one now. Run over.
Right. How interesting. So what you're saying is that people in this house might be healthier than normal.
Exactly. Now, here's another one now. Right, so we've another one now going the opposite direction here now.
Yes.
Coming across this way, right down across.
Oh, right.
Here's something,
That's
Roger.
Interesting.
Have you noticed this in places before?
I have, and trees get gnarled roots,
that's right,
and bent shapes.
Yeah.
Yes, there was
they tend to bend away, and fruit-bearing trees bear very little fruit.
That's it.
And the crack in the concrete here.
Yeah.
Exactly where the line goes through.
Absolutely typical. Right, so
In our first test, we asked Brendan to find a geopathic stress line. Roger would then try to verify this with a geomagnetometer, an instrument that measures changes in the Earth's magnetic field.
in the middle. Right, so it's now calibrated to be in the middle. You see that?
Yeah.
You see that? You see that's the geomagnetic.
Yeah.
side
So,
of it.
and that's exactly where I found the geopathic stress line.
Yeah. So as I go away from the crack, the strength drops. Yep, and as I come back towards the crack, it goes back up, reliably and replicably. That's science, you see. You can do it time and time again. If I came back 10 years from now and did this same exercise, you'd see the same thing.
So these are your divine rods?
Well, they are, but they're much slower than yours.
At last, I've been proven that I wasn't talking rubbish.
No, that's a completely scientific instrument.
Right, so it could be a subterranean water moving or flowing in that direction.
In that direction, or it could be a metal tube of some sort.
It's more than coincidental that this is where I found the geopathic stress line, and this is where you're finding...
This is the absolute confirmation of that signal that you were receiving
Very
from
good.
the much more sensitive cells of your body and your muscles than this is capable of detecting. This is crude compared with any organic
The human body,
living creature.
Now that line has gone in that direction.
Right.
So we'll
Roger has spent his life talking about the kind of sensitivities that Brendan displays naturally. In our second test, we wanted to find out if the lines do fade in strength. Brendan found another line and marked 2 points 10 meters apart. Roger then used the geomagnetometer to measure the difference between them.
You can see how this is now going weaker and weaker. See how it's coming? It's coming down. It's coming down. And as we get towards the point where we agreed to measure it, you can see it's bop. It's dropped down.
straight down.
Gone down to it's done about half the whole scale. That's effectively 2,500 nanotesla over a 10-meter distance. And to put that into context, that is about 5% of the Earth's geomagnetic field in 10 meters, which is astonishing.
So by the time then it reaches the house, theoretically it should be completely gone.
Well, it'll certainly drop a lot more.
So what you're saying then is what I have been saying is right, that there is something in the Earth here, or some means by which they have actually reduced the strength of the field as they actually approach the house.
You very rarely see a drop of that magnitude over such a short distance.
And do you have any theories as to the possible explanation for what?
One magnetic field can alter another one and nullify it. So if, for example, there was a big magnet, a big piece of iron under the ground there, nearer the building, then that would have the effect of progressively weakening the field as things got nearer to it.
Although time was against us, we went to Castle Borough, another building designed by the same architect as Johnstown Castle. We asked Roger to carry out the same tests and found the results were identical. Not only had we proved that Brendan was detecting a signal with the dowsing rods, we'd also shown that geopathic stress was known about many years ago. This offered us a tantalizing view as to what our ancestors really knew about geopathic stress and how they avoided it.
I believe that all the materials in the world are there for us to solve certain problems, and certainly in the past they would have been more in tune with which ones did which job. And it doesn't surprise me at all that back in time, if you were building a fairly impressive house, that you would go to all lengths to make it safe and secure. There was a controlled operation to stop the stress reaching the house at Castleborough, and I think it would be fascinating to find out what was done, what kind of barrier or material was put in to actually stop this radiation getting to the house on all sides.